Good morning, everyone, and good morning to you too, Sir Jeffrey. I am Angel Rose Guetera, taking a Bachelor of Secondary Education major in English first year. So today we are going to tackle about the Philippine Constitution, specifically the 1899 Malolos Constitution, together with the 1935 and 1973 Constitution. So when we say Constitution, this is the rule book for a state. It sets out the fundamental principles by which the state is governed. It also describes the main institution of the state and defines the relationship between this institution. For example, between the executive, legislature, and judiciary. It also places limits on the exercise of power and sets out the rights and duties of citizens. So that is Constitution. Proceeding now to the objectives of this lesson. So at the end of this lesson, we will be able to learn about what, where, and when the 1899 Malolos Constitution was established and its preamble. Second, we will be able to determine how, why, and when was the 1935 Constitution was established and the events that happened. And lastly, we're going to learn about the preamble and the articles under the 1937 Philippine Constitution. And now, Miss Rosal Solibas will continue the discussion. Thank you.
Good day everyone. Today I'm going to report about the 1899 Malolos Constitution. The political constitution of 1899, or in Spanish, Constitución Política de 1899, was the constitution of the first Philippine Republic. Was written by Felipe Calderon y Roca and Felipe Buencamino. The constitution was inspired by the Constitution of Mexico, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Brazil, Belgium, and France. Was promulgated on January 21, 1899. So the 1899 Malolos Constitution was written by Felipe Calderon y Roca and Felipe Buencamino as an alternative to a pair of proposals to the Malolos Congress by Apolinario Mabini and Pedro Paterno. After the lengthy debate in the latter of 1898, it was promulgated or put into effect on January 21, 1899. The 1899 Malolos Constitution was inspired by the Constitution of Mexico, Guatemala, Costa Rica, Brazil, Belgium, and France because these countries' form of government is republic. Republic means a form of government in which a state is ruled by representatives of the citizen body. So it means that the citizen of the country can run for a position in the government, and also it has the right to choose the rightful one to lead. Republic government can be called also as a democratic government. The Malolos Congress. May 1, 1898, the Spanish was defeated by the Americans in the Battle of Manila Bay. June 12, 1898, the Declaration of Philippine Independence was issued at Kawit, Cavite. On July 18, 1898, Aguinaldo issued a decree for the election of delegates to the Revolutionary Congress. So during the Spanish occupation, the Americans came in the Philippines and helped the Filipinos to defeat the Spanish people who colonized the Philippines for 333 years. So on May 1, 1898, the Americans finally defeated the Spanish in their battle at the Manila Bay. Later on, June 12, 1898, Emilio Aguinaldo waved the Philippine flag as a declaration of Philippine independence at Kawit, Cavite. So on July 18, 1898, Emilio Aguinaldo issued an order to have the election of delegates. On September 15, 1898, the Revolutionary Congress was assembled at the Barasuin Church in Malolos Constitution. So on September 15, 1898, as what we can see at the picture, The delegates was assembled at the Barasuan Church for the election of officials that will serve the country. Then Emilio Aguinaldo appointed 50 delegates, in all composed of wealthy and educated men. So during this time, the only person that can be an officials are those who are wealthy and educated. Because this is the first government of the Philippines, that's why it needs those characteristics so that the government will function well. Drafting of 1899 Malolos Constitution was drafted for the first time by representatives of the Filipino people. Emilio Aguinaldo was proclaimed as the president. So the 1899 Malolos Constitution is made for the first time by the Filipino representatives. After many years of being the slave of its own country because of the Spanish, finally the Filipinos are now in control of its own country. We all know that a country can work well without a leader. That's why Emilio Aguinaldo was chosen to be the president of the 1899 Malolos Constitution. Because Emilio Aguinaldo fought for a free and the independent of the Philippines and the first one who go against the Spain. That is the reason why he is chosen to be the first president of the country. So, General Emilio Aguinaldo, seated at the center, with the 10 of the delegates to the first assembly that passed the Constitution in the Barasuan Church in Malolos. According to Emilio Aguinaldo, ito ang pinakamahusay na alaala ng mga simulain ng Rebolusyong Pilipino at isang di maitatangging patunay sa harap ng sibilisadong daigdig ng kakayahan ng mga Pilipino para sa sariling pamahalaan. Emilio Aguinaldo believed that the 1899 Malolos Constitution served as the evidence that Filipino people are capable enough to rule its own country, and the Filipino people has the knowledge in terms of politics and most of all the nationalisms to its country and its freedom. Preamble. We, the representatives of the Filipino people, lawfully convene in order to establish justice, provide for common defense, promote the general welfare, and ensure the benefits of liberty, imploring the aid of sovereign legislators of the universe for the attainment of these ends, have voted, decreed, and sanctioned the following political constitution. So the preamble of 1899 Malolos Constitution serve as the introductory part that explains the purpose and courage of the 1899 Malolos Constitution. The 1899 Malolos Constitution aimed to provide safeguards against abuses and enumerated the national and individual rights not just only for the Filipino and of the aliens too. And also, one of the article that is very important that was made under this constitution was the Article 5 that declares that the state recognizes the freedom and equality of all beliefs, as well as the separation of church and state. We all know that during the Spanish occupation, church has the power to make the decisions. The officials can't make a move or a project without the final or the approval decision of the church. But because of the Article 5 of the 1899 Malolos Constitution, the government has right to make their own decision without the church intervention and vice versa. 1899 Malolos Constitution established a democratic republication government with three branches: the executive, legislative, and judicial branch. The executive branch is headed by the president. The legislative branch is in charge for making laws. The judicial branch is called the court system. So these three branches, it called for the separation of church and the state. The executive branch is headed by the President, whose constitutional responsibilities include serving as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, negotiating treaties, appointing federal judges, including the member of the Supreme Court, ambassadors, and cabinet officials, and acting as head of state. The legislative branch is in charge of making laws. It is made up of the Congress and several government agencies. Congress has two parts, the House of Representatives and the Senate. The judicial branch is called the court system. Judicial powers were given to the Supreme Court and other lower courts to be created by law. So this picture illustrates the three branches of Philippine government. The first one is the legislative branch, or the one who makes the law. Consists of Congress, Senate, and House of Representatives. The second one is the executive, or the one who carries out the law. Consists of the President, Vice President, and the Cabinet. And the last one is the judicial branch, or the one who evaluates the law. It consists of Supreme Court and other courts. The end of 1899 Malolos Constitution. The 1899 Malolos Constitution was lasted from January 21, 1899 to 1901. It was never enforced due to the ongoing war. The Philippines was effectively a U.S. territory those time. The Philippines was not acknowledged by the other countries. So the 1899 Malolos Constitution was not fulfilled because of the ongoing war and lasted only from 1899 to 1901. The Philippines was never acknowledged by the other countries because it became the territory of the Americans because of the Treaty of Paris. We all know the Treaty of Paris when we were in elementary and high school, right? So the Treaty of Paris is where the agreement of the Spanish and Americans happened. The Philippines and the other countries was brought for 20 million US dollar and became the American territory. And the Spain transferred the Philippines to the America on December 10, 1898. That is the reason why American defeated Spain. Although the American has more advanced equipment than the Spain, so the Spain agreed to the proposal of the America so that they can advance with the use of the 20 million US dollar. Then after Emilio Aguinaldo knows this agreement that fooled them, the Filipino, because they thought that the Americans are helping them, but in fact, it goes other way. He go against the Americans to bring the Philippines back to the Filipino. But Emilio Aguinaldo did not succeed, and he was arrested together with his men by the U.S. militaries in the name of the U.S. government. This served as the end of the 1899 Malolos Constitution. But many years has passed, another constitution was drafted, and that is the 1935 Constitution.
The 1935 Constitution. The 1935 Constitution is also known as the 1935 Commonwealth Constitution. Commonwealth defined as the independent country or community. Independent country means the citizen of the country itself govern and control the laws, rights, and ruling the whole community of a country. The 1935 Constitution provided a legal basis of the Commonwealth government, which was considered a transition government before the granting of the Philippine independence with American-inspired Constitution. The Philippine government would eventually pattern its government system after American government. So the significance and the main concept of the 1935 Constitution serve as the legal basis for the Commonwealth government and a 10-year transitional period from 1935 to 1945 in the preparation for the independency of Philippines from the American-based Constitution and was also granting independence from the U.S. government, which that time ruled the Philippines. So before the 1935 Constitution was implemented in the Philippines, there were various events that happened. The Hair Horse Cutting Act. The Hair Horse Cutting Act was created by Butler Hare, Harry Horse, and Bronson Cutting. This was approved on January 17, 1933. And this is the first U.S. law passed setting a process and a date for the Philippines to gain independence from the United States after the 10-year transition period, but reserved several military and naval bases for the U.S. as well as imposing tariffs and quotas on the Philippine exports. Hair Horse Cutting Act was opposed by Manuel Alcazar for the reason that it was not stated to truly free the Philippines from the American government. The reason for this is that the provision of the Hair Horse Cutting Act is not giving freedom for the Philippines to export goods and services into another country, since there are many military and naval bases from the United States that are guarding. So, the Manuel Alcazar, the Commonwealth government president, led a mission to the U.S. advocated for a passage, the Tydings-McDuffie Act. This Tydings-McDuffie Act was also called as the Philippine Commonwealth and Independence Act. Under this act is to eliminate objectionable provisions of the Hair Horse Cutting Act. U.S. statute provided for the Philippine independence to take effect on July 4, 1946. It is signed by the U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt on March 24, 1934. And under this Tydings-McDuffie Act is to allow the Philippines to adopt a constitution and form a government. This government is the Commonwealth government that was led by the Filipino citizen. So when was the 1935 Philippines Constitution created? The drafting of the 1935 Constitution was called as the 1934 Constitutional Convention. This was started on July 10, 1934, ended on February 8, 1935. It was passed and certified by the President of the U.S. on March 25, 1934. The 1934 convention was led by Claro M. Recto with 202 delegates to draft the 1935 Philippine Constitution. This Philippine 1935 Constitution was ratified through a national plebiscite on May 14, 1935. On September 15, 1935, millions of Filipinos voted for the highest official of the Philippines, which are the President and Vice President. Manuel Alcazar won the position of the President and Sergio Osmeña as his Vice President. Exactly 2 months of voting from September 15 to 1935. On November 15, 1935, the 19th Constitution came into full force effect. During the 1935 Constitution, what are the events happen, or what are the Constitution created? Filipinos are now assigned for the branches of government. There are 3 branches of the government. The first one is the Executive Department. This Executive Department governs the state by implementing laws and creating policies. So, ang the executive power is in the hand of the President and the Vice President of the Philippines, which are only allowed of creating policies and implementing laws to the country. The second branch of the government is the Legislative Department. It is a law-making of the government. Dire sa Legislative Department, sa branch of the government, mahimo ang mga law. And the power of this is in the hand of the National Assembly. So the right of creating the law is in the power of hand of a National Assembly. The third branch of the government is the Judicial Department. This includes the court that interpret and apply the laws of the state. So kung ang legislative department is the making of the laws in the government, in judicial department is the interpretation and applying the law of the state. The judicial power is in the hand of one Supreme Court. Filipinos are now independent. Filipinos government established by this constitution shall be known as the Commonwealth of the Philippines, or could create their own republic as called as the Republic of the Philippines. The Bill of Rights. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or process without due process of law, nor shall any person can be denied the equal protection of the laws. So, under this provision of the 1935 Philippine Constitution is that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due to process. So everything that is occurring in this in relation to the life, liberty, or property of an individual shall come into process. Without due process is very punishable by the law. Suffrage. Suffrage is this the paghalal or ang karapatan ng pagboto. The National Assembly shall extend the right of suffrage to women. At this point of time, women are allowed to vote and run for the position of even in the highest official. So, not less than 300,000 women possessing the necessary qualification shall vote firmly on the question. So, after this provision of the 1935 Constitution has been implemented, a lot of women has been on the process of ruling the society. The general provisions. This is the very plot of the provision of the 1935 Constitution. The flag of the Philippines shall be red, white, and blue with a sun and 3 stars, as consecrated and honored by the people and recognized by the law. So the creation and existence of our national flag is in under the 1935 Constitution. The National Assembly shall take steps toward the development and propagation of Tagalog as the national language until otherwise provided by the law. English and Spanish shall be removed as the official language. So since Philippines has been colonized by the US and Spanish colonizer, so as our language has been influenced too. People at the time of the colonizing tend to use only English and Spanish. But in the creation and under the implementation of the 1935 Constitution, it has been said that should be a propagation and development of the Tagalog as used as the national language of the Filipino. So when did the 1935 Constitution ended? The 1935 Constitution was interrupted by the events of the World War II with the Japanese occupying the country. On 1946, the freedom, the independence that the Filipino really wanted to achieve was still granted to them. The people in Philippines are now living free from the colonizers and also taking advantage to the independency that was granted to them. They already have the language to use and speak, with the recognition of own country, and that has its own flag. People now have the equal rights on everything, including the rights to vote and protection to the law. And even women could vote and run for the highest official of the Philippines. That would be all about the 1935 Constitution of the Philippines.
The 1973 Philippine Constitution. Martial law is the temporarily imposition of direct military control of normal civil functions or suspension of civil law of a government. So, President Ferdinand E. Marcos was the first president to be re-elected because of his disastrous remaining power. He declared martial law in 1972, just before his last term. He then manipulated an ongoing constitutional convention and caused drafting of a new constitution, the 1973 Constitution, which allowed him to rule by decree until 1978, when the presidential system of the 1935 Constitution was replaced with a parliamentary one. The 1973 Constitution, this was ratified and proclaimed by President Marcos on January 17, 1973. Amidst widespread protests and controversy, Marcos issued Proclamation Number 1102, certifying and proclaiming that the 1973 Constitution had been ratified by the Filipino people and thereby was in effect. The 1973 Constitution, composed of a preamble and 17 articles, provides for the shift from presidential to parliamentary system of government. A preamble is an introduction to the highest law of the land. It is not the law. It does not define government powers or individual rights. It clearly communicates the intentions of the framers and the purpose of the document. So, here is the preamble of the 1973 Constitution. We, the sovereign Filipino people, imploring the aid of the divine providence, in order to establish a government that shall embody our ideals, promote the general welfare, conserve and develop the patrimony of our nation, and secure to ourselves and our posterity the blessings of democracy under a regime of justice, peace, liberty, and equality, do ordain and promulgate this Constitution. The 1973 Constitution has also 17 articles. Article 1, the national territory. Article 2, Declaration of Principles and State Policies. Article 3, Citizenship. Article 4, Bill of Rights. Article 5, Duties and Obligations of Citizens. Article 6, Suffrage. Article 7, the President. Article 8, Batasang Pambansa. Article 9, the Prime Minister, the Cabinet, and the Executive Committee. Article 10, the Judiciary. Article 11, Local Government. Article 12, the Constitutional Commissions. Article 13, Accountability of Public Officers. Article 14, the National Economy and the Patrimony of the Nation. Article 15, the General Provisions. Article 16, Amendments. And Article 17, Transitory Provisions. The 1973 Constitution provides a parliamentary form of government where the executive authority of the state vests with the Prime Minister. Parliamentary system is a form of government. A parliamentary system of democratic governance of a state or subordinate entity where the executive derives its democratic legitimacy from its ability to command the support of the legislature, typically a parliament to which it is accountable. There are three branches of the parliamentary system. This includes the executive branch, legislative branch, and judicial branch. Under the executive branch are the monarch, Prime Minister, President, and Councilor. Under the legislative branch is the Parliament, and also under the judicial branch are all courts. In every constitution, it has always weaknesses. So here are the weaknesses of the 1973 Constitution. Under this new system, Marcos held on to this power and continued to govern by decree. Marcos continued to suppress dissent and thousands of vocal objectors to this rule. Corruption allowed Marcos and his wife Imelda Marcos to live extravagantly. The justices of the court were appointed by the president alone. And the last is the relationship of the court and chief executive under Amendment number 6 to the 1973 Constitution. And of course, there are also strengths of the 1973 Constitution. It ensures the citizens' health, education, and security. The Constitution let the records and books of account of each member to the public. Natural resources of the Philippines are limited to the citizens itself. The Constitution ratifies the rights of the workers and maintaining and preserving our Filipino culture. So, the length of the effectivity of this Constitution is from January 17, 1973 to February 22, 1896. The 1973 Constitution was replaced by the Freedom Constitution, also known as Proclamation Number 3S, 1986, then our current Constitution, the 1987 Constitution.
Conclusion. In 1899 Malolos Constitution, the first Philippine Constitution was drafted and adopted by the First Philippine Republic, which lasted from 1899 to 1901. It was written by Felipe Calderon and Felipe Buencamino. The 1899 Malolos Constitution proved that Filipinos are capable and has a knowledge about politics, and they want the Philippines to be free. But despite of that, other countries did not acknowledge Philippines because during the American occupation, the Philippines was governed by the laws of the United States. So the 1899 Malolos Constitution is the first Philippine Constitution and the first republic government in the entire Asia. General Emilio Aguinaldo was the president of this constitution because of his exceptional deeds for the Philippines. But the 1899 Malolos Constitution did not last long. It lasted only from 1899 to 1901. Because the Philippines was under the territory of America because of Treaty of Paris. But despite of that, this constitution served as evident that Filipinos can rule its own country, the Philippines.
Conclusion. The 1935 Constitution was approved and adopted by the Commonwealth of the Philippines from 1935 to 1946 and later used by the Third Republic starting from 1956 to 1972. During the establishment of 1935 Constitution, the Philippines were able to speak and decision to create a political order based on democratic principles, and the Philippines truly gained independence under the American government. The 1935 Constitution was interrupted by the World War II with the Japanese occupying the country.
Conclusion on the 1973 Constitution. So when democracy was restored in 1986, President Corazon C. Aquino issued Proclamation Number 3, which is suspending certain provisions of the 1973 Constitution and promulgating in its stead a transitory constitution. And then a month later, President Aquino issued Proclamation Number 9 as 1986, which created a Constitutional Commission tasked with writing a new charter to replace the 1973 Constitution. And then the 1973 Constitution was finally ended on 1986. So that's the end of our discussion. Thank you for listening, and I do hope that you learned a lot on our discussion. Thank you.